This is the final session, and quite exciting again for me is that this is all about researching the case for esports. And I think Mark, who put this conference together so brilliantly, deliberately put this section at the end, because it's almost like sometimes you start with this, researching the case for esports, but we thought we'd end with this because this is where the real data points will come. And we've got two great speakers coming up for you. Aaron Koshy from the International Journal of Esports, he's going to kick us off, and he'll be followed by Brian McCauley from the Esports Research Network. So without any further ado, if Aaron's ready, the floor is yours, Aaron.
So everyone hopefully can hear me. Thank you very much for the invite to speak here today. Really looking forward to talking about it. First of all, I have to give a quick apology. I'm in the hospital right now. I made a backup and a backup plan, and both backup plans have failed. So if my emergency bleep goes off, I have to go. So I might have to make a quick exit in case something does happen, but hopefully it doesn't. So let's talk about research. Hopefully I can tag in Brian as well. He's obviously well equipped as well to talk about it. What do we do at the International Journal of Esports? We're a open access, peer-reviewed, double-blinded journal focusing on publishing the very best in esports research from around the world. We're very interested in having an international approach, getting research from Europe and America, but also very much so from Asia and the rest of the world as well. So we've got a lot of interest. We've had lots of researchers saying we want to do more research in esports. So I really wanted to take the opportunity to talk about it. If you have research ideas, please look at our website, IJESPORTS.org. The whole concept is if you've got access to players, whether they be amateur or professional, it should be possible for you all to conduct quite interesting research, either on the prospective side, organizing a research study, looking at what parameters may affect performance, but also looking more retrospectively, looking observationally, who are the players right now, as the previous team mentioned? Is it a certain demographic? Does that need to be changed? Can we learn anything from that at all? What we're doing at the journal is really trying to not only publish the best research, but also trying to get groups that may not necessarily think of publishing the data they have. So I'm talking about students who often do quite interesting work in esports, and also the professionals themselves, whether they be coaches or managers or even some players themselves, have an interest in analyzing their performance. We've also been speaking to organizations, so the analytics organizations, the game publishers. These are obviously groups that have massive amounts of data, and we could be exploiting that a lot more if we form some partnerships. And certainly on the academic side, we can do a lot of analytics there and seeing what may be affecting performance, what may be changing to things like the venues or the designs or even the timings of certain matches, if that can have effect on different players. So that's a brief overview of what we're trying to achieve at the journal. We're very interested in making inroads into both the commercial entities that are governing a lot of esports, as well as the educational side, so the schools, the colleges, the universities. And we're very open. We'd love to hear more from people that have an interest in research. I personally believe that research probably represents the highest return on investment you can have when it comes to esports as well. It's such a it's got such a high potential for data analytics when it comes to this area, not merely because it's all digital anyway. So we can do an awful lot without having to invest so much. And I think hopefully in the next few years, we can understand more about physiological monitoring and about how we can monitor their performance of the players, amongst the many, many other things. I've got lots more to say, but I didn't want to take Brian's time. I think we're going to keep switching in and out.
All right. Hello. I'm Brian. I'm here at the Jönköping International Business School, which is at the Media Management and Transformation Center. And that, of course, is the city of DreamHack, which is usually brilliant, but this year has been a bit crap because the highlight of the city hasn't happened for me. And basically, I'm the vice chairperson of the Esports Research Network, which is an initiative by Tobias Schultz that was started in July 7th, 2019, where we all got together at the ESL1 Cologne. And it is between Tampere University, our school, and the Media Management Transformation Center here, and Siegen University in Germany. And basically, it's over 200 members, most of whom are PhDs or are doing their PhD from 35 countries. And it's an effort to actually promote esports research because it's such a fantastic thing and it is really a future lab for the world. And so our goals are to firstly to connect researchers around the world, achieve rigor and excellence in research, but there's other aspects like teach the next generation of researchers, achieve diversity in esports, link to practitioners. I'm reading this, by the way. I can't remember this off the top of my head. Help other researchers enter esports because it's so multidisciplinary. And we also want to solve problems with esports by working with esports. And so, like, if we just look at our board, we have Nico Bessoms, who's a professor at the University of Paris. He's also vice president of the French Esports Federation. Julia Hischner is just finished her PhD, and she has worked for ESL for almost 20 years. And so some of the things we do is we try to get members together in our Discord channel. We have a podcast, the Esports Research Report, where we're trying to actually promote research and the PhD students and the people in the industry and everything. It's not a for-profit thing or anything. It's really a resource we want for education. We will be hosting a conference in December, which was going to be in Paris, but again, the year that's in it is terrible. So it'll be online in December, and that'll be mainly about health and stuff like that. And if you go to the website, we also have the biggest database list of esports publications we think available in the world to date. And so everything is kind of a work in process for us. There's a board, there's 200 members, and we're looking to go for funding and connect people. And it's basically, esports is so multidisciplinary that I'm marketing technically. We have people like Aaron, who's health. We have people like Tim in Ireland is studying sleep and esports performance. You have the sustainability people, the environmental people, the humanities people. You have the technology people. You have the sports people. You have basically it's everything. And that's what I loved. And also, I get to go to DreamHack twice a year usually. And that's the whole reason I'm in this town and not in Stockholm. But anyway, so, I mean, you can log onto the website, you can join if you want. And we hope that anyone who wants to contact us about anything can actually do so. And people do. And I'm actually with the journal with Aaron as well, because the mission is quite the same. The International Journal of Esports is open access because we believe in everything being accessible. And as the ERN, we actually believe about giving people accessibility to networks. And one of the really cool things is that esports people are awesome. And games people are generally awesome. So we work directly with a lot of people, the major associations and organizations. And we're actually an official association in Germany now, which is another strange one from the Irish man with his PhD from Australia, living in Sweden, being the vice chair of a German association, while playing online with people from all over Europe in CSGO, where I was a gold Nova until last night. Now I'm a silver again. So anyway, that's from me. So we welcome any questions. Not about CSGO.
Brian, that's brilliant. I particularly like the kind of the whip through the world right at the end there. Made me smile a lot. You got the best accent, by the way.
Well, that's why they're all smarter than me. I'm just here for the accent. Just so they send me on. Just go talk in your Paddy accent, or Brian, will you?
Couple of questions, at least here in the chat, for both of you. So take them in any particular order you want. But do you think is there any particular areas you're looking to research into for your International Journal of Esports?
So I'm personally interested in the health side, as Brian said. My background is cardiology and technology. So I think there's a lot of potential in monitoring player performance. So I'm talking about very basic things like the heart rate, the blood pressure. You'd imagine that in periods of stress or those clutch moments, you're going to see a difference in these parameters. And if you start studying it and you start looking at the stress response, logically, you should not only be able to predict it, but train through it and see if that improves performance better. I personally think when the teams do a debrief and you've got one of your players and you look at them and you think, how did you end up in exactly the wrong position? They often might say, I have no idea. But when you start putting in objective parameters into the story, you can start saying, well, it looks like you are breathing twice as normal. It looks like your heart was off the roof. So perhaps you're a bit more stressed and we need to work through that. Maybe these moments get to you more than you thought. That's just a very simple way. As a journal, we are genuinely interested in all the disciplines that are connected to esports, which is actually all of them. So I'm talking about computer science, marketing, economics, all the sciences, medicine, obviously. It's simply because they're all connected to esports in some way, and we're still at a very foundational level in terms of knowledge. We don't know how basic things such as economics in Asia affect funding, which then affects the events. I think we can do a lot more research, and I would say to the people, I presume the reason why that question was asked is they're thinking, what are you interested in? And therefore, what can we submit? I would always recommend thinking about simple projects. Even though esports has been around for some time, we're still embryonic. And so in terms of research, I would recommend doing simple projects relatively well. So the methodology should be strong. And if you're not sure about that, send us an email or contact your nearest university. And often the academic colleagues there will be quite knowledgeable in the statistical methods and the methodological activities you can do to make sure that the findings you make are reasonable. So hopefully that answers that question.
Oh, that's good. Brian, have you got anything to add to that?
Look, I'm all about local esports and sort of stuff like that, LAN parties. That's where my interests lie. I just don't want Aaron to send me papers on Dota 2 mechanics to review because I don't understand it. It's literally, he knows that now. It's literally that complex. It's that huge. It's, we do the podcasts and I don't know what they're talking about half the time. We had Will Parton on the other day talking about cultural industries and I was just smiling and nodding because it's the world. I think it's easier to understand sports as an entirety than it is to understand esports. I've been playing CSGO for a year and I still know less than the average teenager playing it. It's just so huge and so impactful. And one of the challenges we have is to convince funding bodies that it matters. And you have that over $500 million number. And I saw you guys had the $1 billion figure from Newzoo. And of course, we had a paper published in the journal that valued it at $25 billion. So Aaron arranged the Newzoo guys and the authors of the paper to have a little debate about the valuation of the esports industry. And it's just, that's what we want to do, is we want to make sure people can research whatever they want, because team dynamics, communication styles, use of technology. I think I have a paper on the review on innovation for sports marketing. It's everything. And it's hard to convince the elder professors in charge of millions of euros that we're not talking Pac-Man.
Yeah, that's a thing that comes back time and time
yes.
again.
Yeah, just to add on to that, if I may, it's just, again, hammering home that there's so many simple projects that can be done. If you talk to FPS players, half of them will swear by the idea that you need to tilt your keyboard by 45 degrees so you get faster access to the relevant keys. And then you've got another group that are saying that TKL keyboards are what improves their response times. You've got the whole controversy around DPI and mouses. There's so much that we don't understand that would benefit from studies that would in turn improve probably performance across the board. And these are all projects that can be done relatively easily and quite cheaply. It just needs a bit of planning and the right people involved.
Yeah, and I guess, we've seen it in this world in the last 12 months. Money plays a big part. We've had a number, not just one, we've had multiple vaccines against COVID-19 when the whole of the scientific and medical research profession said, be careful, it's going to take years. And the reason it hasn't taken years, from an outsider's perspective, is two things. Firstly, the scientific community have got the will to work together. Secondly, governments have put in colossal amounts of money to make it happen. And, I think in our sort of small version over here in esports is that we do need more funding to come into the business to sort of justify the hype. My theory of where people gather, markets will happen. Sometimes that can take a little bit more time to actually feed through and fertilize and help to sort of nurture the community. A lot of it at the moment is done on love and support. And I think we do certainly need governments and bigger institutions to take us seriously. They should do, they will do. It's just a question of not if, but when. And I guess that plays back into research. I mean, do you guys what's your sense of the amount of research and the type of research around mental health and well-being within specifically the Scottish esports scene, but perhaps, less specifically in the esports scene globally?
Well, I know that Matt Hart at Leicester, he had an event cancelled, a symposium on mental health and esports. So he's rearranging that to be digital. So we'll be announcing that on the website soon once he confirms that. And, that was quite key. And unfortunately, COVID cancelled it. So we're going digital with it again. And that mental health aspect, it's huge. I mean, I'm keeping a diary of my CSGO game as a research project. And I write quite often, like, oh, thank God I'm not a 14-year-old girl or a 15-year-old insecure boy dealing with these rude word insert here. So I can see I get wound up sometimes playing with the way people act, and I'm quite secure at my stage in life. So I'm sure like that can be quite down, like social media, but I'd rather kids were, playing esports than just browsing Instagram or stuff like that. I mean, it's magnificent, the teamwork, the strategy, everything about it, a sense of community. And that's why I kind of fell in love with it. I just get so much support and help from the community all the time. I'm just, I'm blown away by how much help I get from the games and the esports industries, because there's so many brilliant people in there that it's just, and I love it. I'd much rather talk to people about esports and game development than I would talk about marketing issues. So I really enjoy my job most of the time.
Yeah, and mental health is absolutely huge in esports, both at a competitive and then the video gaming side as well. So we just, as a journal and with the ERN as well, supported a multi-million-pound grant for mental health, which will focus on not only the discovery, but also hopefully the therapy of mental health, which probably will be in a digital form. So we stand by that. It's absolutely huge. And it's because we know when you play games, not only does your mental health affect your gameplay, but your gameplay affects your mental health for better and worse. So it's a bit of a circle. And I'm sure mental health is overrepresented for reasons. So we need a lot more research in it. We've been talking about funding. Funding is obviously what drives a lot of what we're talking about. And I think it's about changing a bit of the paradigm. It's not about saying we want to look at X because it's interesting, but it's more about saying this is something that affects a lot of people. If we look at it, there's a very high chance we'll make constructive learnings from it that will improve the value of the team, the performance in general, the cohort or the sector as a whole. So it's about really presenting it as a return on investment, which I kind of mentioned earlier. This is what is going to attract and wake up a lot of the commercial partners to see research is probably one of the key domains that will drive up output in the sector.
Yeah, I mean, that we see that in other industries, and we shouldn't be surprised. I suppose to the three of us, we despair sometimes when you talk to people and they don't understand the point of research and the return on investment in research, which is there. It's there in data to see, but sometimes it gets in the way of why we're doing this research. I mean, that slides into another question from the audience around IP and copyright. And if you've got any insights into any research around those issues, in terms of how the business is structured, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a big topic. It's probably because when you're thinking of esports research, a lot of it is around professional play, isn't it? And then it's also around working with game publishers. So I think it relies on a really, really pragmatic and open approach. For example, if I team up with Excel Esports or Fnatic or G2, and we look at their players, obviously we won't then be releasing player-sensitive information, revealing what their strengths and weaknesses are. But it's about the research team and therefore the sponsoring or collaborative organization saying, yep, we're concerned about it, but this is not an issue if we do X, Y, and Z. On the flip side, when working with game publishers, it's again having the approach of, this is what we're interested in, and this may have an outcome of this. Are you comfortable with that? Because as researchers, we're obviously interested in the integrity and the quality of the data, but we must be aware that we don't really want to affect consumer markets. So it's about positioning it so that organizations see value in the work and the researchers get what they want in terms of the data and the output. So it has to be about open conversations and trying to see what problems you can deal with ahead of time.
Yeah, it's a good point around the provenance of research. In my career, as a person that's been put up to defend the games industry, on live TV many, many times, and sometimes, the media's got a really good point around whether it's loot boxes, whether it's addiction issues, all that stuff, right? And my attitude's always been, face it, deal with it. As a games designer, we make games to be immersive, to be compelling, to play one more time. Aaron will know that can play quite close to addictive behaviour. Okay, and that can go from being great to not great. But I think that the industry, for its size, has had a problem figuring out how to get research done, because there's no doubt at all that certainly the games publishers have got the financial resource to do it. They are always worried about being seen to be funding research, which then comes up with potentially a favourable outcome for them or their game, or indeed other games. And equally, as you said, Aaron, that when they fund this stuff, they are not really wanting to hear something fairly bad on the other side. So, there's that kind of balance. So it's always been positioned that it shouldn't be the industry funding research, it should be somebody else. But unfortunately, the somebody else is yet to be identified. So as a result, for an industry that grows massively, it's grown all my life, and is only a young industry, it's like maximum 40 years old, we've got an astonishing, we're bereft of really good research. And that's a concern. And what would you say? Should the industry solve that problem?
So what I would say is it's about being a bit more open. If you think of a few game publishers and we suggest, let's look into player behavior, addiction / toxicity, it would be, yes, indeed, they don't want research to show that their game is full of toxicity. But at the same time, if the research is committed to actually looking at what can be done about it, that can always be positioned as a forward-thinking approach. There isn't an esport known to man that doesn't have an element of toxicity. So I think it's about saying, actually, everyone knows about this. We're researching it because we want to do something about it, which is often obviously good PR and important for the longevity of the game. And we're now doing research so we can have evidence-based models on improving our game and improving the way people play the game. So it's about being a bit more grown up about it, I think.
Yeah, I think that is incredibly wise words. Brian, sorry I cut you out there.
No, they are quite open to it. It's a big negotiation when you talk about IP and stuff like that. I mean, I have a lot of friends at like big companies, and one friend, I think he nearly has to say, "Well, these are my opinions and do not reflect X company," and I laugh at him because he has to say stuff like that all the time. So these large publishers, they do want to make things better. A less toxic, a less dark world that drives people away is good for business. And I think the Faceit example of Minerva, their AI, and I talked to one of the senior people there about it, and I think that's great. The only problem with Faceit is that I'm not that good. And I let my teammates down, people who are taking this seriously. So, that sort of stuff is brilliant. And you can see, I just joined a Discord server just before I came on here, just bouncing through them, some sort of Irish CSGO server. And the thing was, we're going to play on Faceit to avoid the cheats and, the toxicity. And I think these things that are happening, I think the example of Riot pulling out of the deal with Saudi Arabia, or not Saudi Arabia, whichever country I forgot, but over the LGBT rights thing was fantastic. I think that was a really good example of an engaged audience keeping a company in line. And from what I can see and from what I've heard from in Riot, they do kind of stick by those values, that there are those values there. And I think a lot of people who are in games and in the games development industry and esports are fantastic. It's there's more, it's just that the one bad apple example. And I think that's what happens a lot, because most of the people I meet are fantastic and I love it. And I'm like, oh, it's okay. I'm in Jönköping. It's in the middle of nowhere in Sweden, but wow, what a great esports community. What a fantastic group of friends I made as soon as I came here, because we shared that love of games and stuff. And to me, that's the most important thing. And that's why I research what I do, is that it's fantastic. So when we look at the bad stuff, and then I agree the gambling and the loot boxes and the fact that every time I spend €2 on a container, I never win a good weapon, that's research, is that, I can afford it as well. I'm not spending any money going out for dinner at the moment. So, those elements have to be addressed. But if we look at it from a research perspective, I'd much rather celebrate the brilliance of it. You had the girls movement here. In Sweden, we have female legends. They work with DreamHack and they do so much to promote equality. I have Prima Esports, Martin there. They're doing things in schools to prevent toxicity. You have Esport United here, run all the grassroots, an umbrella brand, and they work to help the grassroots here. Phoenix Blue started here in Jönköping working with the government, and they organized a Smash Brothers scene here. And that was, they're literally, the government worked with them to help promote equal access to esport, and they organized Smash Brothers. So I hate to think that we look at the issues of IP and toxicity and gambling, and when so much of it is about, as I heard earlier, is sharing and joy and community and being able to talk about stuff. I interview game developers, and the first thing I say is, what's your favorite game? And then if they haven't played BioShock, I tell them you're not allowed to do the interview anymore. And we laugh, but it's fun. And, there's that shared culture that is so magnificent. And that's why I always love this research network. And that's why I love going to any sort of game event, because you can talk to people and it's overwhelmingly positive. And that's just the point I'm making. It's brilliant. And the games are brilliant. And, it's all generally brilliant. And I would have gone mad the last year of not going out if I hadn't, got into CSGO and made my first esports online friends through that platform and joined community. So to me, maybe some research should focus on all the great things about these, as Tobias Schultz in his book says, over enthusiastic, over dynamic, and over passionate people.
Yeah, I for the record, I really agree with that. I think that's well said, and I would personally like to see much more research around the positive aspects of games, because look, you, Brian, and millions would have been worse off without online games this last 12 months. There's no doubt about that at all. Everybody I talk to says the same thing. And it's not just because we're gamers. Just mates of mine who play FIFA, who wouldn't even know what a gamer is, but they play FIFA. They've found salvation through their online friends, most of whom they don't actually have never met in the flesh. So another kind of an interesting part of our online identity. Do you think that the kind of portrayal of women in esports, and maybe even women in video games, female characters in games, do you think that plays into, impact in terms of participation? It's going off the subject really, because it's blending back into Alison Morgan's session.
Well, actually, the next week's podcast is with Amanda Cote, and she had a book on it. So I'll be releasing a podcast discussing that with her. And I can't remember there's a great chapter 4. It's got a great title that involves the word tits and, tits toxicity and teammates or something like that. And we discussed that, we discussed the tiny little armor and the portrayal. And, that's, I think, while it's dealing with negative things, that the research is looking at how to address these is a positive thing. And yeah, so we've had We had Sarah Hayes on the podcast talk about queer esports, which is for lesbian women to get together in a community. We had Lee Peng, who did her PhD on gender and esports in the University of Glasgow. You know, Steph, my co-host, she publishes a lot on, works a lot on gender. So I really have thought about getting a voice modulator to experience people responding to me as a girl to live it on CSGO, because I can't even imagine what it's like. So yeah, there's just issues, of course, and teenage boys are, as having been a teenage boy, are the worst people in the world, and we can all admit that. You know, as they can be, not all of them, of course, but they are men at their probably worst, and I think that's a big issue. You know, when we're at our stupidest and our frontal cortex hasn't fully formed. So yeah, that can get bad, but all the good work around it and the things people do is just fantastic. And, you know, so the podcast will have Amanda Cote, and you'll be able to see about her book. I'm not promoting the podcast. It just happens to be, we discussed this.
I'm going to ask you to promote the podcast by putting the link into the chat, because quite a few people on the chat have asked for that link, Brian. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's on. Yeah, it's been a lot of work. Thanks, Jonathan, for all your work helping me get the Spotify done. So there's a YouTube channel. It's on Spotify, Google, and Stitcher, and I think that's enough. And it's there to help promote research, and it's also, I want it to be used as a resource to teach. And one of the things I forgot to say is that for anyone who's a student and you're studying business or health, or you're going to be a doctor like Aaron, proper doctor, as he says. No, he doesn't. But if you're going to you can study anything through esports. You can take something you love and examine concepts for your student thesis through it. And that's a brilliant thing that, you know, whenever I get students to do an assignment and they have free reign, I said, do it on something that you kind of are interested in. And with the thesis, you can do that. So students can do their thesis in esports on any topic: business, health, social sciences, education, whatever they want.
Cool. Well, we've got a few minutes, and there's just one question from Anonymous. So get ready.
Great.
What about the general feeling of toxicity being an inherent part of competitive video games? Some players often seem to go back to it. It's just part of it. What do you think about that? It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Okay. I think toxicity is an incredibly difficult topic. It's not clear-cut like some people try and say it is, like toxicity equals bad. Obviously it does, but I don't think if you get 10 people in a room, they will all agree what toxicity is. That was all part of the reason why, as a journal, we launched the International Essay Competition, because there's so much nuance in the world of esports. I do recommend anyone listening and finds toxicity interesting, they go on our website and you'll see the winners of the essay competition, many of which decided to enter in the concept of what is toxicity and how do we combat it. So answering the question, I think toxicity is something that everyone needs to stand up against, but you've also got to remember that toxicity happens because you genuinely care about something. That's usually the case, or part of it. And I think anyone who's played a video game at a semi-competitive level, when you play at that level and you're putting your effort in, and then you feel cheated by someone else or someone isn't pulling their weight, you'll get irritated because that's the human phenomenon. So that's when toxicity arises. And I think sometimes the argument becomes, can we expect perfect behavior from everyone? We should aim for that, but it's about not being too prescriptive. When it comes to discriminatory behavior or behavior that really affects others, that should always be taken seriously. But it's also about remembering that, we can't expect people to suddenly behave like superhumans that are morally excellent in all situations, because I don't think we'll get to that stage. And you have a lot of factors then that can be very hard to actually control for. It's probably a different viewpoint, but I think it's important when you think about the game.
That's a really
I've
good
been guilty of it.
Yeah.
I've been guilty of it in response to people, not unprovoked. I've got more commendations for being friendly than anyone I know on CSGO because I'm, hello team, let's have some fun. You don't have to apologize. And, I just generally have great fun playing it. But, if someone is being a bully, I have, in the heat of the moment, been quite a smartass, bit rude. And one time my partner said, who are you talking to? And I went, uh-oh, I'm being drawn into the trap of, so now, because I was recording it, I was kind of like, I won't mute them. So now I mute them. Now I stop them. But, everyone says sorry. And I said, don't say sorry. It's only a game. And that can wind someone up. And you're like, oh, dude, it is a game. It's literally what it is. And so it's the people who start the toxicity. And I agree with Aaron, it's the passion. People are very demanding. And I just one game the other day. Two guys were obviously teammates were playing, and after the pistol round, they got 2 kills each, and we didn't get any. And I said, oh, could you not try do something, guys? It's like, oh, wow. The end of round 1, because I didn't get a kill, you've already started. And then they typed what was quite obviously an offensive word in another language about their teammates being differently mentally abled, let's just say. It was very little difference in the spelling. And I was like, are you serious? You do realize like that's very similar to English, and you're typing it to the other team about our capabilities. And I struggle. I'm trying to be patient and I'm trying to be friendly, but you can't blame people for responding to toxicity, and to understand that people are passionate and they want to win. And especially when I look at the case of teenagers, when they're being told to go to bed, told to go to school, and they have no control of their lives. I can do what I want. I can stay up till 6 o'clock playing CSGO. I'll only get in trouble with my partner, which is maybe worse than a parent. But, that they don't have control. So this thing they have control over that are very passionate about and such a core function of their life is something that they're going to get mad about and they're going to get inflamed about. And again, it's the Faceit example. When I've played on Faceit, I've been struck how quick people are to report toxicity. And a few times I've experienced toxicity in Faceit, I've looked at the profile of the people, and they've only joined a couple of days ago. And so that's to me is a great initiative to stop that. And people are so quick. And I've met some lovely people who said, look, let's just report him. He's not part of it. But, God, if you didn't do something stupid when you were a teenager, you didn't live, really.
Yeah,
maybe that's just me. The academics are well-behaved teenagers.
It's not just you. It's certainly me as well. But I think we're closing up now. And I think that last question from Anonymous was a good question because it played into the nuance. I think Aaron's point about passion can boil over. And boy, do we see that in the real world. And it's not surprising we see it in the online world, which is the real world. So I do think it's part of all of us learning to get along with each other as best we can. And if we do that, we generally have a lot more of a laugh because we find common touch points. And so I think, in an era where people are shouting about free speech on one side and then shouting about free speech on the other side, it's quite nice sometimes to listen. Good. Well, thanks, Aaron. And thanks, Brian, for your amazing insight. Remember to keep pushing that podcast because that's good. And keep reaching out for more research into your journal. So thanks very much indeed.